Hello and welcome to the English Martial Arts YouTube channel. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the principles as described and written down by George Silver. In the late 16th and early 17th centuries, George Silver, an English swordsman and fencing theorist, outlined a systemic approach to combat in his writings, Paradoxes of Defence, and Brief Instructions upon My Paradoxes of Defence. His work sought to counter the growing popularity of foreign, particularly Italian fencing styles, which Silver felt were both dangerous and unsuited to practical combat. Silver's own system emphasises timing, positioning and awareness in a way that prioritises the safety of the fighter while maximising offensive capability. Central to his philosophy are his concepts of true times and false time, the four grounds and the four governors. Each of these principles plays a role constructing a balanced, effective fighting style rooted in realistic martial encounters. True times and false times. One of Silver's most significant contributions to martial theory was his distinction between true times and false times, a framework describing the sequence and coordination of movements between the hand, body and feet. Silver believed that this sequence was crucial for both offensive effectiveness and defensive safety. When movements occur in the correct order, the true times, a fighter retains control, power and the ability to respond quickly. When they occur out of order, the false times, the fighter risks extending and exposing themselves to counter-attacks. True times. The true times describe four possible sequences in which the hand leads, thereby allowing the weapon to reach the opponent first and establishing a defensive posture even during an attack. Time of the hand. This is the quickest and most controlled movement, involving only the hand and weapon. By moving the hand alone, a fighter can feint, threaten or attack without committing the body, making it easier to adjust or pull back if necessary. Time of the hand and body. In this time, the hand and body move together. This sequence adds force and reach to the weapon's movement, allowing for a stronger offensive action while keeping the body in alignment for defence. Time of the hand, body and foot. Here, the hand and body move together, along with the lead foot. This time allows for controlled advance, bringing more reach and momentum to the strike while maintaining balance. Time of the hand, body and feet. The final true time involves the hand, body and both feet moving together, allowing a full committed advance. Silver cautions that while this time offers maximum reach and power, it requires precise timing to avoid overextending. These true times give the fighter control, balance and adaptability, allowing attacks to be launched efficiently while minimising risk. False times. Conversely, Silver's false times involve sequences in which the body or feet move before the hand, leaving the fighter unprepared to attack or defend effectively. Time of the foot. Moving one foot before the hand results in a delay that exposes the fighter to counter-attack, as the weapon is not yet in place to defend. Time of the foot and body. When both the foot and body move before the hand, the fighter's posture becomes unbalanced and the weapon is not positioned to counter threats effectively. Time of the foot, body and hand. This sequence delays the weapon's engagement, leaving the fighter vulnerable until the hand catches up. Time of the feet, body and hand. Moving both feet and the body before the hand creates the most extreme vulnerability, as the fighter overcommits, making it difficult to recover balance or defend quickly. Silver criticised the false times for their vulnerability and found that they were commonly used in continental fencing styles, such as the Italian rapier, which he argued favoured showy but unsafe techniques. By avoiding false times, a fighter minimises their exposure and maintains a stronger defensive posture. The four grounds. Alongside his concepts of timing, Silver introduced the four grounds, which he described as the fundamental elements of effective combat. Each ground serves as a principle that allows the fighter to maintain control and safety while engaging with the opponent. Judgment. Judgment refers to the ability to perceive and interpret the opponent's actions, distance, positioning, and intentions. A fighter with good judgment can anticipate and respond to their opponent's moves effectively, allowing them to choose the optimal moments to strike or defend. Distance. Distance is the control of space between oneself and the opponent. By maintaining the correct range, a fighter stays out of reach of their opponent's attacks until they are ready to engage. Good distance management allows the fighter to close in to attack and withdraw when necessary. Time. In this context, aligns with Silver's true times and false times. Proper understanding of timing allows the fighter to act in response to the opponent's movements, either striking preemptively or defending at the correct moment to avoid harm. Place. Place refers to the positioning of oneself in relation to the opponent. By maintaining advantageous positioning, a fighter reduces their vulnerability and can maximize the effectiveness of their attack. Place involves awareness of angles and the ability to exploit or even evade the opponent's position. The four governors. Building on the four grounds, Silver introduced the four governors, which serve as guiding principles to maintain control over one's movements and decisions during combat. These governors ensure that the fighter uses the grounds effectively. Judgment of measure and time. This governor combines the principles of distance, measure, and timing, allowing the fighter to act effectively within the correct range and at the correct moment. It informs decisions on when and how to approach or withdraw from the opponent. Measure. Knowledge of advantage in place. By maintaining awareness of position, the fighter can gain a tactical advantage. Positioning allows the fighter to minimize their vulnerabilities while keeping their weapon ready for attack. Pressing in. This governor involves the advancing forward the opponent when it is safe to do so, using control of timing, distance and positioning to close the gap effectively and apply pressure. Pressing in is done with caution, ensuring that the fighter does not overextend or fall into false times. Flying out. Flying out is the principle of retreating safely when necessary, using timing and positioning to avoid attacks. Flying out is an essential defensive measure that allows the fighter to maintain control and avoid counterattacks by disengaging effectively. George Silver's principles of true times and false times, the four grounds and the four governors, create a cohesive framework for practical balanced combat. His focus on timing, positioning, and careful management of movement was a response to the increasingly stylized techniques of his contemporaries, which he felt were unfit for real-life combat. By emphasizing controlled, measured actions and rejecting showy techniques, Silver's approach to martial arts prioritized safety and effectiveness. His system remains influential in the study of historical European martial arts, particularly within English martial traditions, and provides a timeless approach to understanding the fundamentals of combat. The application of George Silver's principles in armed and unarmed combat. George Silver, a prominent English swordsman of the late 16th and early 17th centuries, developed a systematic approach to martial arts centered around the effective use of timing, distance, positioning and control. His works, Paradoxes Defense and Brief Instructions upon My Paradoxes of Defense, lay out his ideas about practical combat, including the concepts of true times, false times, the four grounds, and the four governors. These principles form a unified framework for martial effectiveness applicable to various weapons like the sword and quarterstaff, and also hold value in unarmed combat. Silver's approach emphasizes controlled movement, timing, and positioning, allowing for a versatile style suited for real-world confrontations. in both armed and unarmed fighting. Silver's principles help fighters maintain safety and exploit opportunities and minimize exposure. Applying the principles in armed combat, the sword and quarterstaff. When using weapons like the sword or quarterstaff, Silver's principles are essential for achieving both offensive effectiveness and defensive safety. His true times and false times dictate how and when to move the body, feet and weapon, ensuring the fighter remains controlled and avoids overcommitting. True times and false times. These concepts are central to managing movements in relation to the opponent and weapon. With the sword or quarterstaff, the true times prioritise moving the hand first, allowing the weapon to engage the opponent while the body and feet stay prepared for defence. For example, when striking with the sword, moving the hand before the body or feet keeps the weapon ahead and ready to intercept any counter-attacks. This method of engagement prevents unnecessary exposure and enables quick adjustments. In contrast, the false times, moving the feet or body before the hand, leave the fighter vulnerable by delaying the weapon's readiness. If the body or feet move before the weapon, the fighter may find themselves overextended or poorly aligned, allowing the opponent to exploit the opening. This vulnerability is especially dangerous with long weapons like the quarterstaff, where the fighter risks both losing reach and exposing themselves to attack. The foregrounds. Silver's foregrounds, judgment, distance, time and place, are essential for managing the complexities of armed combat. Judgment is the ability to read and interpret the opponent's movements, distance and potential threats with the sword or quarterstaff. Good judgment allows the fighter to anticipate the opponent's strikes and respond effectively. Distance is crucial, particularly with weapons like the quarterstaff, which requires maintaining a safe but effective range to keep the opponent within striking reach while staying out of danger. Proper distance management prevents the opponent from closing in and allows the fighters to use the weapon's full reach. Time refers to the timing of attacks and defences, ensuring they align with the opponent's movements. When using a sword, timing is vital for making controlled attacks, parrying and countering without creating openings. Place involves positioning in relation to the opponent, such as angling oneself to avoid direct attacks while maintaining reach for counterattacks. This positioning allows the fighter to engage effectively while avoiding unnecessary risks. The four governors. These principles guide a fighter's control over movement, measure and tactical decisions. Judgment and measure and time ensures the fighter knows the ideal range and moment to strike. With weapons like the sword or quarterstaff, this means knowing when to close the gap to attack or when to keep distance to avoid the opponent's strikes. Knowledge of advantage in place allows the fighter to maintain favourable positioning. For instance, angling slightly offline during a sword fight creates a safer, less direct path for the opponent's weapon to reach the fighter, allowing for safer counters. Pressing in involves advancing toward the opponent safely using the principles of time, place and distance to apply pressure without overextending. Flying out is the act of retreating to maintain distance, especially valuable when defending against an opponent with a longer weapon. A quarterstaff user might fly out to avoid close engagement, while a swordsman may do the same to avoid a more aggressive opponent. Together, these principles form a comprehensive approach to wielding weapons, allowing fighters to strike effectively and defend themselves without unnecessary risk. Silver's emphasis on controlled movement, safe positioning and timing aligns well with practical combat and enables the fighter to balance offence and defence. The relevance of Silver's principles in unarmed combat. While Silver's writings focus on armed combat, his principles are highly applicable to unarmed fighting. In unarmed scenarios, the same needs for timing, distance and positioning apply, though without the extended reach of weapons. The principles help unarmed fighters maintain a control over the engagement and prevent overcoming or leaving openings. True times and false times in unarmed fighting. The concepts of true times and false times remain valuable in unarmed combat, though adapted to punches, kicks and other body movements. True times emphasise moving the hands or initiating an attack without moving the entire body forward prematurely. For example, a punch can be launched using the time of the hand, where the hand strikes without the entire body advancing. This allows the fighter to test the opponent's reactions without committing fully. False times in unarmed combat, where the feet or body move before the hands, can lead to unbalanced attacks, leaving the fighter vulnerable to counter-attacks. Moving the feet before the hands in an unarmed strike could result in overextension, reducing control and leaving the face or torso exposed to counters. The four grounds in unarmed fighting. Each of the four grounds, judgment, distance, time and place, remains critical in unarmed combat. Judgment in an unarmed context involves reading the opponent's movements and anticipating attacks, which allows the fighter to avoid or counter strikes effectively. Distance becomes even more important in unarmed combat, where the range is shorter and misjudgments can lead to immediate vulnerability. Maintaining proper distance enables the fighter to stay out of reach of strikes or kicks while being ready to move in for a counter. Time helps the fighter respond to the opponent's actions with well-timed punches, kicks or evasions, ensuring that attacks are launched at the most opportune moments. Place involves positioning in relation to the opponent. Proper positioning in unarmed fighters allows a fighter to control angles and minimize exposure to incoming attacks. The four governors in unarmed combat. The four governors continue to apply, guiding how a fighter controls engagement and manages risks. Judgment of measure and time is vital in knowing when and how to enter or exit the opponent's striking range. Knowledge of advantage in place helps the fighter maintain advantageous angles and positioning, making it harder for the opponent to strike directly. Pressing in and flying out are useful for advancing and retreating safely, allowing the unarmed fighter to apply pressure while maintaining distance. Silver's principles in unarmed combat help the fighter maintain a balanced approach, emphasizing safety while enabling defensive action. The focus on timing, distance and positioning in this system is as relevant without a weapon as with one, allowing fighters to stay in control and minimize their exposure to threats. George Silver's principles of true times, false times, the four grounds and the four governors provide a versatile framework for effective combat with both weapons and bare hands. In armed combat with a sword or quarterstaff, these principles guide fighters in coordinating their movements for maximum reach, power and control. For unarmed combat, the same principles emphasize balance, timing and positioning, helping fighters stay defensive while being ready to strike. Silver's work, though grounded in the context of 16th century armed combat, remains relevant today, offering insights that bridge the gap between traditional and modern martial arts by focusing on controlled, disciplined movements and a balanced approach. Silver's principles allow fighters to engage effectively, safely and with confidence in any martial context. And just a side note, although I say Silver's principles, these principles and training were probably being used centuries before Silver wrote them down on paper. Thank you for watching. See you soon.